What's my good side?
Joe, you don't have a good side. Welcome everybody.
I expected that from these two, not from you, Bill.
Welcome everybody to our Lunch and Learn on Business Succession Planning. We've got a great panel discussion planned, and we've got our sponsor today is Donna Moffitt, and Donna was the 1998 board chair for the Lake Norman Chamber of Commerce. And Donna is going to share a little bit about what they do at her particular firm. And so Donna, if you'll come up here and talk about what you guys do in terms of services.
Yep. So just a little bit of snippet. I'm Donna Moffitt LLC, accountants and consultants, and I have an office on Tyler Avenue and have been in the area for over 30 years and have enjoyed every bit of it. Our business is in accounting, consulting, and tax. And in no particular order, most of our work is done with businesses who need the consulting and the planning, and the accounting and the tax come after that. So that is what we do. I also am a firm believer that if you are doing a business transition, whether or not you're looking to buy, sell, merge, or want to buy something yourself, you need to surround yourself with the best team that you can find. And so I was more than happy to come in and support these fellows that are behind me and in that endeavor, and I hope y'all learn a lot out of this.
Thank you, Donna.
Thank you.
We have three business brokers here today, and I'm going to ask each of them to say a little bit about themselves. But before we start, this is Dale Gillmore. Dale served recently for the last 6 years as the business growth chairman for the Lake Norman Chamber of Commerce with Quest. And Dale also has Make an Impact Foundation, but he also during his term over the last 6 years created a program with the Chamber of Commerce called Leaders and Legends, which specifically is engaging more entrepreneurs. But great having you here. In a little while, I'm going to ask you to say a little bit more about what you do. Jeff Edge, I met Jeff probably 15 years ago with the Charlotte Chamber of Commerce as the economic development staff person assigned for economic development of all of Mecklenburg County. We do have now a Lake Norman Regional Economic Development Authority, but really all the economic development for Cornelius, Davis, and Huntersville was done by the Charlotte Chamber of Commerce, and to some extent is still done by the Charlotte Regional Business Alliance, although what they typically do is bring the business here and then kind of turn it over to our EDC. But Jeff is with Vikings. And then we have Joe Vagnone, a local business broker. Joe and I go back again about 20 years. Joe also served 6 years as our business growth chair. And during that term, he came up with the Small Business Event of the Year, which we are having April 30th through May 6th. It is our 10th show, Joe. And we believe we've been doing that for this long?
No, I do not. I can remember when you talked me into it.
And we used to have that event where it took place at Peninsula, and we would have 150 and 200 people show up for our Small Business Event of the Year. We thought that was really great. And then COVID happened, and we weren't going to be able to have any event at the Peninsula Club. We said, well, what do we do with it? Took it to WSIC on the radio, but also Facebook Live, captured on YouTube. And instead of having 200 people, we found out, hey, on that night alone, we had 2,000 people had watched it. And then it continued to add up, 4,000, 6,000, 8,000 people watching one event that we did. And we were like, oh, wow, that's a little bit better. Yeah. So now we do work with WSIC on that particular program. Dale, I'm going to start back with you, and let's talk about Quest. What does your agency really do? What services do you provide?
So we serve privately held business owners and their families. And we kind of have 4 lanes of service. One we call Explore, which is basically meet the business owner and their family where they're at, what planning they've done that's long-term in nature, and what planning they haven't done that's long-term in nature, just to understand, are you a growing company? Do you have a transaction coming anytime soon, either buying or selling? Or do you have this asset or group of assets that you have to carry on to multiple generations? So we start with the Explore work, and you land in kind of 3 buckets with our firm. You're either growing company and there's growing work to do, which is maybe getting ready for sale, or there's CFO type projects that need to be done and you don't have a CFO, or maybe you have a CFO and you've got so much going on that CFO can't get to everything and need our help. Change, which is where all of the M&A opportunity comes, but we go through every option, whether you're going to sell to an ESOP, keep it and hire a president, or a leverage buyout, or private equity, or sell to a competitor, or some hybrid version of all of those options. And then legacy is where a lot of our buy side work comes from, but those are families that are entrepreneurial and have lots of entrepreneurial assets, that whether it's real estate or core businesses that they're investing in, and they have tons of financial needs, both at the family level and the trust level and the estate level, holding down to the holding company, all the way down to the entities that they own, which may be buyers of things, may be need to sell something. So, but that group is, building the family engine to go from where it is today to the next generation is not, a simple task to accomplish, because it's sort of the business of running businesses, right? So,
Dale, we've talked about it. You and Joe may not necessarily compete, with each other. You've got kind of a different range. What kind of range, in terms of dollar volume, might somebody you might work with?
Yeah, we kind of define our clients in two buckets. One is, I'd say, $5 million value business or above, which is kind of our definition of a growing company. And then our family work is, probably $50 million net worth and above, 50 million to 500 million. So below the radar, kind of big companies and families that not a lot of people know what's going on.
Jeff, Viking Mergers and Acquisitions, you do play sort of in the same sandbox of businesses. Share a little bit about Viking.
Yeah, so we have 10 offices across the Southeast. Currently, we're based out of Charlotte. I work out of the Cornelius office with Viking. We're focused on companies between about $1 million and 30 million in enterprise value. I'd say the core customer we're probably entertaining is between that 1 and 7 million range. I think last year our average transaction was like 4.4 million. So we do work with privately held businesses. We're a lot of times working with a company that may be only going to be purchased by an individual. Sometimes it gets into the private equity, which Dale had mentioned, or the strategic buyer, which is a company buying a similar company out there. So it really depends on the size range of the business, is the type of buyer that we're engaging in the process. But all the businesses we work with are privately held, family type businesses.
Joe, again, you're more local and you have a range as well. Share a little bit about who you work with.
Yeah, let me first say, and I think I speak for all of us, Donna, thank you so much for putting this on. When we get a referral from Donna, her clients are absolutely prepared. The financial information is well understood by their clients. Thank you so much. I watched Donna years ago sit down and talk to a brand new young lady getting started. I think she was going to start cutting dog hair, and you must have spent hours trying to help her get things set up. So thank you, Donna, for putting this on. We really do appreciate that. So, I like to tell people it's sort of small, medium, and large, what we do, right? I'm the Walmart of the small business world. And Julie hates when I say that. But the truth is there's a real area for very small businesses. When I say very small in value. For example, these guys talk in terms of the value of the business. We talk in terms of gross sales. So any business that has a gross sale of 5 million or less is somebody we can help. We can create value for them. We do a lot of what we call business opportunities, which may be businesses that have challenges, and we try and help find a buyer that might be able to fill in some of those challenges. So what I do, I work with both of these guys. I'll send them clients that in fact are over what we do, and their firms also send me clients that smaller deals that they don't want to do. So for me, I love telling people I have bought and sold, owned and operated more small businesses than anybody you're going to meet. I know it's a big, bold statement, especially sitting up here with these two guys. But the point is, I've been around the block enough at these small businesses. I know them, I understand them, and I can advise them in a way to try and get them some value. And most of the time, some challenging situations. And so for me, the distinguishing factor is probably gross sales and the amount of employees that my clients have, and trying to put together a package that attracts a potential buyer. One of the core things we have to do a little bit harder than these guys do. They have attractive businesses that people are interested in because the cash flow they can live off of. A lot of the businesses I sell are secondary businesses, or cash flow is a challenge. So paying the value for the business based on the cash flow gets to be kind of a challenge. That's where the creativity comes in. And so that's kind of the difference between the three of us. So for me, defining what we call buyer profile, who the buyer is, what's their motivation, is more of a factor for me, and discerning who to go after than, say, a medium or a smaller business.
Yeah, we've talked about this on your show and just socially, that certain people start a business and then they have a succession planning of, oh, I've got a son or a daughter that might take over the business. But you're seeing trends that the next generation don't want to be involved.
I don't know about these guys, but my clients, their family members don't want the business. My clients have worked hard their entire lives. They've sent their children through school with their businesses. They've built enough retirement for themselves. They feel proud of the life that they have created. And then they look to their children to say, okay, which one of you want to take it over? And they say, thanks, but no thanks. It's not what we want to do. So in my world, that has changed dramatically in the last, I'll say, probably 15 years. Again, I don't know about you guys, but in my case, that's why we're so busy, because we're now looking for that person essentially that wants to take over the life of the seller.
I'll chime in on that. I think one of the things we advise a business owner is don't give your business, to your children. More businesses get run into the ground that are handed over. And I think one of the challenges you do find a lot of times, if one of the kids is working in the business, they may not have the financial wherewithal to purchase the business. And so, we will tell a lot of folks, if they're early, in that planning process, take a look at ways you might be able to help your child be able to buy the business from you, because you've put your wealth into your company. That should be your retirement. You shouldn't have to hand your wealth over to your heirs when you've put such hard work in for 20, 30, 40 plus years. And so I think that's one of the dynamics we see so often, is that the family members aren't necessarily financially able to buy the business.
Dale?
Yeah, and to Jeff's point, in our explore work that we do, we really measure, like, how much money do you have to have, and what's this business got to do to perform that life plan of yours? And a lot of times in that measurement, we've come to the conclusion that, yeah, you can't just give this to your kid. You need some of this for retirement, and in both situations. So then we decide, is this something? And sometimes we have a young person or a second generation that's very important to the business and capable of running it. So that's kind of the first question. Is there any nepotism going on here, or is this person actually doing a job, and do they love it? Is this something they really like to do? If they do, can you make a lane that still gets sort of the parents, dad or mother, whoever might be, what they need to retire on, but also can the son stay in control of the business? So we work on a lot of hybrid kind of 2 or 3 lanes at a time projects, which might mean we find somebody that supports the son to buy dad out, so dad still gets what he needs, but the son can still run the business. Or sometimes we look at it and the son sort of thinks about it and says, you know what, I'd rather just go ahead and have you sell to somebody, as long as I keep the role that I love and the culture of my company, which is often a concern for both our sellers, right? the culture not changing, then we have to be wary of what buyers we choose to let in the door to buy the company. But, you know, that second generation, you're right, it's far and few between that somebody can actually really run it. There may be some folks that are really talented at a job. And then you have to ask yourself, is this a job or a lifestyle or a career or a purpose? You have to figure out what the motivating factors are. But then I would say with our families are, we see a lot of the family work where they start to create lanes of, all right, well, I don't necessarily want anybody to be forced into the business if we can organize that, but I want, you know, my family members to be entrepreneurial. So maybe we create entrepreneurial lanes if they want to start a business or if they want to buy a business. So, you know, you're seeing a lot of difference. I think the modern age is just very different, where it used to be, well, dad told me I had to do this, so I did that. And I think that's, you know, that keeps us all busy.
I think Dale's hitting on probably the biggest distinguishing factor between the three of us. As you continue to add value to the business, there's less buyer profiles that can fit that need, right? And in my case, we may have 5 different buyer profiles. For those of you that don't know, call that a buyer motivation, why they want to own the business. There might be 5. Well, that drops to 3 or 4 in the mid-size level, and it may only be 1 or 2. And I don't mean 1 or 2 people. I just mean 1 or 2. For example, you might take an investment firm, capital investment firm, that would be 1 buyer profile. There may be thousands in there, and so that's probably the biggest defining challenge that Dale brings up. And we all are exceptional at looking for those buyers in our lane, right? That is in fact what the challenge is.
Jeff, we just talked about next generation, but what about that individual who, okay, we're all going to start a business and we're going to retire at 70, and that's the plan. But maybe at 40, something happens. There's an illness, stroke, or even worse, and they're incapacitated. No backup plan. How often do you see a scenario like that?
Fortunately, we don't see it often, but we see it. And, you know, I've got a listing right now I'm working on that the seller has some health issues, and we're trying to deal with that. And it creates a time penalty for us trying to get it sold before the business just, you know, falls like a rock. And, you know, we think it's just, you know, paramount that a business owner have a plan in place before they have an issue, right? You know, you want people to think, okay, well, what if, you know, I get cancer? What if, you know, something happens to, you know, to the business I'm in, et cetera? How am I going to deal with that? How's my family going to deal with that if I'm incapacitated and somebody has to make decisions, you know, with the business? So coming up with a written plan and having that on the shelf, and maybe you update that periodically, is really critical.
Dale, Quest, you see this?
Yeah, and I would say, kind of piggybacking the same points that I would agree with everything Jeff said. One of the other things that we sort of do, and if we can get with a business owner soon enough, which is hopefully they don't have to sell, right? Ideally, and we can do this at a controlled pace. You really, when you dig into the strengths and weaknesses of a business, sometimes the business's largest strength is it's also its largest weakness. You know, the business owner may be a fantastic salesperson and has built this business from 0 to 100. And, you know, the reality is there is no sales process. There is no sales team. Nothing's documented, and it's all in the owner's head. And then all of a sudden, you're challenged with, well, I want that guy to stick around so we can transfer everything in his brain to the new company. Which, you know, sometimes isn't realistic, because a lot of times when the guys, if they haven't planned really well, or if there's a health issue, or even if there's not a health issue, they come see the 3 of us and say, I just want to give you the keys and I want my money. And it's not that easy. And I would just say that, to echo that, if the planning in the what ifs should be more, what are all the strengths and weaknesses of my business? Forget about the person. And can I shore some of that up and make this a little easier? You know, do I go ahead and hire a leader of sales, even though I know he'll never outsell me because I'm the boss, right? You know, do you take those steps or not to make the business more valuable ahead of time?
You know, Dale, it's funny you say that, because that's probably the second conversation I have with my clients, which is they'll sit in front of me and they'll tell me how great they are. And they'll tell me how they got the best business in the entire world. And they'll give me 16 reasons why they're it. And the truth is, probably 14 are right. They've stretched the other two, welcome to my world. And then I say to them, unfortunately, I can't sell that because you're gone, right? You know what I mean? So it's really not a strength that you are this superhero in your small business, because I can't sell that unless you intend on hanging around. We have 3 or 4 businesses right now that's a challenge. Great, successful businesses, as long as the owner keeps doing 4 jobs. And so that is the challenge. And when we say prep, that's exactly what we're talking about. What would the business look like if you weren't there? What are the pieces? Who are the staff members that you need to plug in? We call that normalizing the P&L. So in our case, we'll take Donna's P&L from the owner of the business, and now we realize he's a salesman. He's a delivery guy. You know what I mean? And he also does the janitorial work in the lawn, right? And so now we have to normalize the P&L by adding expenditures of different people doing that if he isn't there. And now let's take a look at the cash flow and see what that looks like. And that's hard for somebody who has been taking all of that income in for that business to now accept the fact that the value of the business really may be substantially less than the value you're getting for running that business.
Joe, a few years ago, I sent you a referral to a guy who said, I'm interested in selling my business, but not right now. I'm just thinking about when I exit. Do you have somebody in mind? And send them over to you, because it was a very small business here in the community. But how often do you see you're trying to pick up the pieces with the spouse or maybe the child of that particular person from that business who didn't have plan B?
Yeah, now my stuff's a little bit different than these guys, because most of my spouse and children, they know the business inside and out. They could run it. They just don't want to, right? And so they had to work it. Dad made them do it. Dad made them go on the sales call with them. They know how to run the business. Matter of fact, they know enough to know I don't want it, right? And so because of that, that's really not an option unless a family member gets sick. And then you will see the family, they will absolutely rally around the parent that's sick, and they will absolutely run that business. But they will run to me and say, we'll keep it together, but sell it as fast as you possibly can. And that's where you have to be creative. That's where the smaller in deals, we get to be really creative. Buyers and sellers are open to being creative, because unlike the larger deals, third-party financing most of the time is just simply not an option. I'm really jealous. I hear these guys talking about all these sexy ways to get financing and people to go see who got money. And we don't have all that, right? We got to ask Bob to take a little piece of it, you know what I mean? And Sam's going to finance a little piece of it. So for us, you got to be much more creative in that. But we can get the deal done. You're just going to have to be a little bit more creative on how we move the deal forward.
Joe, we got James Sanders here, and James is not selling his business anytime soon because he's my IT guy. He can't go anywhere. He's got to continue to protect me.
Well, James is like every small business owner. I think you guys would agree on this. Everything I got's for sale if the price is right.
Amen. Amen. Well, let's say James is thinking about Plan B right now. He wants to sell his business inside the next 18 months. What conversation would you have? What are things that he needs to do to prepare to sell that business?
Well, first of all, James' business is bigger than I would manage. So the first thing I do is put him in touch with both of these guys right here, because they're at a different level than, say, the clients that I do. That's the first thing I would do. But the second thing that I would make sure he does is he is planning for, well in advance, maximizing the value of the business. And a lot of times that means backing up, looking at the finances, determining what exactly the future should look like for a buyer. And both of these gentlemen are actually quite good at that. So my advice for a larger company like James would be they need to talk to one of these two guys, because the level that he's at requires a sophisticated buyer, which means it requires a real understanding of the numbers and the finances. Sorry, James, I wouldn't be able to help you, dude.
I thought we were going to knock that out in September. But okay, I'll put it off.
We have a.
So that's a better question for Dale, I guess is what I'm
We
saying.
have a company with multiple locations. Maybe they started here in Cornelius, but now they're located in 7 or 8 communities. But the owner is looking to sell the particular business. What would you recommend to him or her?
Well, I mean, playing off what Joe was just saying, the first thing we're going to do is want to look at the financials. If they don't have clean books and financials, that's something you got to get it right. You can't go to market and adequately value a business if you don't have good financials. We'll have people literally.
That's a client Jeff would then send to me.
No, I mean, we've literally had people hand us an envelope with receipts and sticky notes and said, here's my financials. Well, you need to at least be using QuickBooks or something and have stuff, in order. So, the financials is the first thing. Second thing we're probably going to want to look at is, what is the management structure, back to the discussion about who's there, right? Who's on the team? What do you have that could attract a buyer to say, and I'll use, an individual buyer from this perspective. There's a lot of people in corporate America looking to get out of corporate America. They've made a lot of money. They want to own their own business, control their own destiny, but they may not know anything about the business that they're looking to purchase. So they need to lean on somebody that can help them really continue operating that business till they can get up to speed. So that's probably the second thing I'm looking at when I look at a business is what is the team like? I'm talking to a guy down in Atlanta right now. 2 key employees are like 80 and 60 something years old. Well, that's not a whole lot of runway for a buyer to buy that particular business and be able to, to count on those people being there, for long term. So, kind of the team and the financials are the first 2 things we're going to look hard at and determine, can we help them or not?
Dale?
Yeah, so I would agree with that. And, I guess we always look at where the business is actually headed, like, and what its trends have been. So did it grow and flatten out? And then why did it flatten out? Well, oftentimes we find the reason why businesses flatten out is somebody gets comfortable making the $1 million a year, whatever it is they're making. They get comfortable with that, and then we call that sort of potentially a really good business, but it might have evolved to a lifestyle business. And so when you think of the ones that are multiple locations, I would say, well, are they all operating optimally to what the original plan is? What's the future plan? If it's like, hey, I just don't want to grow this anymore, I'm kind of burnt out or tired, but this is a great, concept, then I might, we work on sort of the projections of what tomorrow looks like with ideally some real, in a conservative way, some real understanding of if I had, X million more dollars to invest and I was buying this, what would you suggest to me if I was the buyer? And so we go through this sort of understanding of where we're at, and we'll pick up on the things where they're tired and try to pay attention to those as things we're going to have to deal with. But, every situation is different. And sometimes we have multiple partners. Sometimes there's multiple ages, I might have, could be a good thing, if I've got a younger 40-year-old partner and an older 70-year-old partner. But so we do a lot of sort of kind of getting ready for sale or growth or whatever it is in our growth plan. We do a lot of sort of work to meet all the partners where they're at and really identify what their personal desires of that business is before we go and sell it. But we also try to identify, do I have to do something internally before I do something externally? Meaning is, if all 5 of them aren't nodding their heads and rowing the boat in the same direction, do we need to prune one of the 5 of them, or somebody closer to retirement and this isn't a good time to sell? Do we do some sort of internal transaction to deal with that before we go to the external opportunity?
What Dale's talking about in my world, I tell people this all the time. Nobody's going to write you a check unless they think they can do something better than you. Now, I'm not saying they can, but they're not writing the check because they are thinking about tomorrow. They're writing the check for tomorrow's revenue, and potential is what we have to hand them. As salespeople, we have to present them with options and ideas. One of the things we do inside our confidential memorandum, matter of fact, Julie's starting to get an idea on what it is we do here, because what we do is we copy what the larger brokers are doing for the smaller business. And so we treat the smaller business like it's a big business. So what they're describing is prep work. We do the same thing, which is a rare thing to do for a small business. Well, that prep is important because we have to present that to a buyer and say, this is what the future could look like. And Dale really hit the nail on the head, because the best thing about my small business clients are the owners, and the worst thing about small business clients are the owners. And so you'll find, I always find myself sort of throwing my clients under the bus, because I have to talk about what the future is, right? And the future is better if you are doing this, this, and this. And then right before we throw them under the bus, I pull them out and say, but you know what they have already done exceptionally well. And so it really is a challenging game at a small business level, because what Dale's describing might be 3 or 4 people, 3 or 4 different departments in a larger organization. In my world, it's one person making all of these decisions, whether they're good or bad. And so the future and moving the seller to think about what a buyer is looking for is really the prep work we try and do on our end.
Jeff, we talked about this a second ago with next generation, but say you have a business owner, multiple locations, again, a fairly large company that they've established. Junior thinks he's taking over, but mom or dad, whichever owns the business, says, we're going to go a different direction. That family dynamic, there could be people within the family structure that doesn't like the decision. How do you counsel that owner through that?
It's a challenge. I've had several where you've had like multiple family members involved in the business. In some cases, multiple owners of the family, that 2 want to sell, 2 don't want to sell. 2 want it to go this direction, 2 want it to go that direction. If they're equal partners, it's really challenging, because who really makes the final decision, and that can be a nightmare. I think from the sellers that I'm currently working with, I've got, I think, 3 that have a child that's working in the business that's very good at what they do, but the sellers have told me they're not capable of taking this on and doing everything. I think parents love their kids, but they also can recognize shortcomings they have and would not want to put them in a position of potential failure. So that conversation is usually fairly easy when it's one person that's kind of driving the bus, so to speak, and they recognize that someone that maybe they would want them to be able to take the business over, but they can't.
In my world, I'll tell you, 20% of what I do is partner disputes. It's a very common thing for us to work through.
Yeah, and I kind of picking that up, there is as you think about, there's always this sort of off the, I don't mean off the books in like some illegal way, but sort of an off the books thing going on that we always have to figure out, right? I mean, it might be that you've got legal agreements that say operating ownership is X, Y, or Z, but there's more of like, well, dad promised me this, or this was promised to me, or that was promised. We spend a lot of time sort of documenting the promises that don't have a document.
Or we've been doing it that way for 22 years.
Yeah. And so we do that right away to sort of unearth the things that are going to be problems later, right? And so we kind of hit things head on, and sometimes creates a little bit of a flurry of you're not quite ready for sale understanding, right? In that work, we do that in sort of a consultative paid manner. These guys will identify it, organize it, and say, come back when you're ready. So our firm does some consulting work too, but these guys would say, hey, look, you're not ready to sell, come back when you're ready. But we I would say that any attorneys in the room are probably out on Zoom. Love you, mean it. This is a place where there is reasonable value if you had somebody really spend a little bit of time with all the documents you should have that you don't on the legal side. I mean, I would say I'll call it the pre-diligence kind of checklist that we all 3 have, which would be, if I were going to buy it, here's all the stuff I'd be asking you for. And half of the stuff they look at us and don't have. Half of that they probably really need. some of the other half the attorneys might say they need. So you have to figure out the delicate balance. But that's the stuff that sort of getting ready for sale, or are you investment grade ready, or all the, you can go out on the website and find all kinds of scorekeeping things like that. So.
And Dale, the reason why that's so important, and Jeff, I know you agree with me, because we don't want to be searching for that when there's a buyer in front of us.
Yeah, I didn't mean that in a bad way.
Right.
I meant like, you're not going to waste their time.
That's right.
They're not going to waste your time.
Right.
You're
The
saying,
deal
this
won't
is a
happen.
problem, you guys need to go deal with
That's
that.
right. That's right. If we don't have what the buyer knows he needs, they're going to be very uncomfortable. So
Yeah.
we're trying to help the client on the front end. I know this list might make you uncomfortable, but I promise you the questions are coming.
Dale, you're a recovering CPA, and that doesn't mean you weren't a happy CPA, but you seem to be much happier now doing what you're doing. Although I know some happy CPAs, but you seem to be very happy doing what you're doing with businesses. What is it that you really like about this particular job, helping people transition?
Accelerating change and good decisions. I mean, basically that. When half of the time, the owner or collective owners have these ideas, they just haven't acted on. So in some cases, I'm not any brilliant than anybody else. All I did was get them to do the things they already knew they should be doing. So I would just say that, and being a part of that. So experiencing the success, goods, and even the struggles that ultimately lead to success. I think that's the part that's really fun for me, because you're sort of digging in, better. The other thing that's really fun is you see these wonderful human beings that have built this business from zero to whatever they built, and it's pretty amazing. And then all of a sudden you see the vulnerability of that human, who you kind of have your own, like, man, you're already impressed with this person, yet you see them in a vulnerable position and they actually need your help. And that kind of generic commitment that you feel that I really want to help them means, that's just means a lot to me. So that's kind of
Well, in your case, you help them reach their final goal,
Yeah.
which is to sell and retire. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a wonderful moment that you help them with.
Jeff, you've been kind of doing this from college. You at Furman University, you got involved with the Greenville Chamber of Commerce and then the Charlotte Chamber of Commerce. You were helping businesses integrate, get into the market. So you've sort of been doing this your whole career. But now in the job that you have, what do you enjoy most at Viking with working with these businesses?
Well, I think it's kind of what both these guys just said. For me, it's more often than not, the seller is looking to retire. They're not looking to go do something else. They're looking to kind of take their life's work that they've spent decades building a business up to a point, and it's helping them realize that dream of being able to go spend all their time now at their beach house or whatever it might be that's their goal. Get a motorhome and travel around the country, and being part of seeing that smile on their face that day of closing when that money goes into their account and they now know they can go do those things it's a pleasure. But at the same time, it's also a pleasure working with buyers, because so many times the person buying the business is an individual and it's their first time to buy a business to run it. And I had a little automotive business that I sold down in Charlotte a couple of years ago, that the gentleman that bought it had two sons that worked for one of the Toyota dealerships in the service department. He wanted to buy something that all three of them could work together on, and ultimately they would take the business over and continue it later. Well, he was hopping on a plane every Monday and flying all over the country in a pretty high-end sales job with a major corporation, and he was burned out, just literally making more money than he could count, but he wasn't happy. And just seeing his happiness now, being able to go to work every day with his sons and not have the headaches and things of the corporate world it's the people relationship.
Yeah, Jeff really hit on the reason I love doing this. Julie and I just sold a auto repair place, Statesville, Mooresville, Statesville, and it was for what I call new Americans, right? I do a lot of that, a lot of creative financing to get the deal done. And these are four men that were three men, excuse me, so pleased to be buying themselves a business. It was defining freedom for them, right? You know what I mean? And it is such a pleasure to be a part of that. It's such a joy, and I do a lot of that, as you can imagine, at my level. So that's a great question, Bill. It is probably the one thing we work hard to do again and again, is get that moment the day after closing when they call us and thank us so much for putting this deal together. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to do it.
And Joe, we've talked about this on your radio show, that the fact that one of the reasons the Chamber of Commerce brought you on board was the ear you had to small business. Because
it was to take advantage of me. Yeah, I know that, Bill.
It is literally you enjoy listening to people and share their information about their business, and you just enjoy that. I've watched you, and then you try to help them. So
because of the level that I'm at, right? It's not all about money. Right. When you get to this level, it's about money, even if you don't want it to be, right? You know what I mean? Money plays a bigger role in where you're going to get it. My level, it really is a lifestyle. You want to plug yourself in to what the seller is doing. You want that life. In some cases, they'd like to move into the home that the seller owns. They want that lifestyle. And so they try really hard to understand what the seller is doing and what they need to do to be able to buy it. And it really is a pleasure because, like these guys have said, I also get the benefit of knowing the seller has been trying to sell for years to get out of his business. They're ready to move on to their retirement. So both ends of the spectrum for me. And of course, Bill, I've been on both ends many times. So I get it, understand it, and I can relate to it.
We've got about 10 or 15 minutes left. We have a lot of people here. Do you have any questions? Three of the most outstanding business brokers I know in the Lebanon region. Anybody have a question of any of the three?
On your checklists, what's the number one item that businesses or small business or medium-sized businesses most commonly fail in your initial conversation?
As Dale's thinking about the real answer to your question, and I want everybody to listen to Dale, not Joe, I will tell you, in my case, it's why we like getting referrals from people like Donna, because most of my clients don't even have P&Ls. They do not have the data, and they could not explain what is on them. So for me, it is having any kind of document, any kind of income statement that we can draw from to look for. So for me, that would be the case. I know it sounds funny, but you'd be surprised the amount of people that literally run their business from their checkbook. And I'm sure you can give them a formal answer.
The biggest thing for us is really, honestly, wherever the key source of the revenue is. And sometimes, and whether there's any kind of documentation around that, I'll give you an example. You could have a customer that you've been working with for 10 years, but have no contract, and just say, hell yeah. The buyer's like, well, I don't care how many years you've been working with them. If there's no contract, I don't know if that's going to continue when I own it, right? So to me, it's always around where the revenue's coming from and how smooth that process is, how well documented it is, both on the sales side all the way to the execution and serving the client side. And to me, that's probably where everybody looks to say, where's all the value of this business coming from? And very often, and I'm still not trying to root for all of our attorneys because I know that they're not cheap, but they're necessary a lot of times. Maybe there's a contract that's not transferable. And now you got to go call your customer and say, hey, I'm going to sell my business. And right here, it says I got to call you before I do that, right? Lots of little things like that sort of unintended consequences of the way you've been running your business for several years that's worked for you, but might not work for the next person. And I would say there's always problems in those lanes somewhere. And it's not necessarily a checklist. It's more like all of the checklists that lead up to all of those things. That's probably the biggest kind of thing that we're always kind of keeping our radar up for pretty quick.
And it's very common. I can tell you a story years ago, about 5 or 6 years ago. We had a deal signed, sealed, and delivered for a cement manufacturing company, distribution company. The guy had been selling the cement manufacturing distribution equipment for over 33 years. And when I asked him, how's that relationship with the manufacturer? Oh, I've known him for years. I've been doing business with them for over 30 years. It's going to be no problem. The deal falls apart 10 days before closing because the manufacturer will not transfer over that agreement to the new buyer. And so sometimes it's very personal because this dude really did know the cement business where the buyer did not. And so that challenge, it comes up a lot.
Yeah,
You should say that. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
If after they buy the business, they want to come and look for brick and mortar, and yet they don't have a business plan, they don't know where their finances are coming in because they've spent money on the business. So can you suggest to them to have a business plan and the finances in order so that when they come and talk to me, we're ready, I can get them in brick and mortar?
Yeah,
Just
you know.
saying, I mean, it kind of, it's just like, and I love entrepreneurs. I'm like
No, no,
myself.
You're right.
I'm like myself.
I told you the best thing about small business people is the owners. Worst thing about small business people is the owners.
Yeah.
I help people in the restaurant business all the time get in business. They listen to everything I got to say. I mean, they will, if I call them at 2 o'clock in the morning, they'll answer the phone because they want to hear what I got to say until I hand them the keys. And the minute I hand them the keys, they know everything. And that's what you're talking about. It really is a challenge that they start to think that, because keep in mind, we wouldn't even be doing something as stupid as spending money, taking a calculated risk, going in business, right? If we're not contrary. And so then to take advice from somebody is hard for them to do. And that's the challenge that, in my case, these small business people, they have to accept that they really have to surrender to some people and experts. That's exactly what Julie and I do. We have a list of experts based on what it is we think you need, and we will try and put you in touch with those people. We do not give business advice. I don't know how to tell you how to run your business, but I bet you I know 2 or 3 people that can help you do that. And that's really the key. You need to send them in the right direction, and they need to listen.
Jeff, do you remember his question?
Yeah, and let me address that one first. You know, I think majority of folks who get a small business administration loan have to show up with a business plan before they can get the loan approved. So you know, if they're going that route, I haven't helped them. You know, if they have.
That might have been one of my clients.
But I guess back to this question, I want to reiterate the customer concentration issue can be huge with medium to larger size deals. And I've dealt with some that have had one customer and we've been able to get them sold, but you talk about the amount of information and things you have to provide to get it over the goal line is just, it's not fun. But I think one of the things we run into a lot is a owner or seller that doesn't know their own limitations and hasn't been doing things to make the business better by getting people in there that can complement what they don't do well. And I'll use an example of a cabinet manufacturer we sold a couple of years ago. The guy was a master craftsman. He could build the best looking cabinets you would ever see. But he didn't know anything about running a business. And we sold it to a guy who came out of a manufacturing background. That guy more than doubled the business in the first 12 months because he knew how to come in and look at all the operations and be able to grow it. So some people can't get out of their own way, so to speak, and the business just kind of putters along. They make money. They get, as Dale said earlier, they get comfortable with a certain amount of income, but they're not looking and willing to do things to take it to that next level. And that's what we see with buyers coming in, having some of those skills that they can do that.
As we wrap up, Joe, you said this yourself. You've owned a lot of businesses, sold a lot of businesses. All of you have been involved in businesses. Best business advice you can give, whether somebody's looking to sell their business or not. Best business advice you can give
For a seller?
for anybody in business. Best advice you can give.
Plan and save for the things that you're probably not going to expect. It's coming. That you will absolutely find challenges that you haven't even thought of.
Jeff?
I'm gonna go back to knowing your numbers, knowing your financials, managing your financials and being on top of that. That's probably where we see most of the problems with people that just aren't financially savvy on that.
Dale?
Yeah, I think finding a way to run your business the best that you possibly can, focused on its end, not your end. Because if you're focused on your end, you might be fine with $1 million a year, but that business, now your kids and family are dealing with a problem if something happens to you. Where if you got the business running on all cylinders and you're focused on the planning side, back to the planning, exit planning, estate planning, family planning, the planning's happening to you if you don't get on the front side and happen to it, I guess.
We'll have your contact information on the conclusion of the video. Donna Moffitt, thank you so very much for sponsoring today's program. We'll have your information there as well. And thank everybody for joining us today. Have a great day at the lake.